tissue, connective tissue, epithelial tissue, muscle tissue, and nervous tissue. So nervous tissue would be tissues in your nervous system. So your axons and dendrites and so on, that connects your brain and receives impulse and gives impulse and so on lah. So that's your nervous tissue. Muscle tissue in your muscles. Okay, so there's three types. You have cardiac muscle, which is in the heart. You have the smooth muscle, which lines your blood vessels and which is inside your blood vessels, and also your GI tract. Okay, and you have your epithelial tissue, which we will learn in this lecture, and connective tissue, which is in all the other parts of the body lah. Okay, so according to the four types of tissues, there's the general functions are for epithelium, it's mostly for covering. Okay, so for connective tissue, it's for support mainly, for muscle for movement, and nervous system is for control of the body movements. Okay, so what is epithelial tissue? It's basically tissue that covers or lines the surface of the body and cavity as well. Okay, so it is composed of either one or more layers of closely packed cells between two compartments. Okay, so what you can see here, this is an example of your epithelium or epithelial tissues composed of many cells, okay, or epithelial cells. So what are the characteristics? So in terms of the first characteristic is in terms of cellularity, meaning what makes up the epithelium is mostly cells. Okay, you can see these are small epithelial columnar shaped cells. Okay, and also another characteristic is the polarity. It has a specific top and bottom. So usually the top layer, we call it as apical layer, and the bottom layer is, we call it as basal surface or basal layer. Okay, so the basal surface or basal layer sits on the basement membrane. Okay, and we also have sometimes lateral surfaces here on each side. Remember, lateral meaning on the sides. Okay, it connects. Sometimes we have junctions. We will talk about in a bit lah. Okay, and this is the connective tissue underneath or the basement membrane. Okay, so what are the other characteristics of epithelial tissue in terms of attachment? The basal surface is attached to the basement membrane, like I mentioned earlier. So this is the basement membrane. Okay, and avascularity, it receives no blood vessels. It receives nutrients by nutrients crossing the apical surface or by diffusion. So for example, here this is the apical surface, so the diffusion of nutrients inside the epithelium is how they receive nutrients. They don't have their own blood vessels, but they have a lot of innervation, nerve endings, and they have regeneration capacity or high regeneration capacity, meaning if they are damaged or lost to abrasion, they are replaced very quickly. So this is important because you imagine this is the first surface of any structure or lining of the human body. If it is easily, so it is easily injured in any, this is the first form of protection of the structure lah. Okay, so if it is injured, it needs to be able to regenerate quickly or replaced. Okay, so the main functions of epithelial tissue is for physical protection, as I mentioned earlier, because this is the first part of the or line of defense of any structure. So it forms as a protection or barrier. Okay, and it also has selective permeability, so it acts as the gatekeeper to let the substance in and out of a structure, and sensation as well, because it has a lot of nerve endings, so it senses changes to the environment. And also some of the epithelial tissue, the glandular type, they also secrete either sweat, hormones, scents, and etc. lah. Okay, so in the epithelial tissue, we also have some specialized structures apart from the cells itself. So for example, here we have the basement membrane, which is connected to the basal layer or basal surface of the epithelium. We also have hemidesmosomes, which help to anchor the cells tightly to the basement membrane. We also have junctions here, which allow some substances, but also prevent certain substances from passing through the epithelium inside the structure. So we have tight junctions and adhering junctions. Okay. We also have attachments or strong binding between the epithelium cells. This is called desmosomes. Very tightly anchoring both cells of the epithelium together. Okay, and we also have some channels or communications of gap junctions where sodium, potassium, and so on can pass through each other. So for example, in the heart muscles, we have junctions between the cells so that they can receive the impulse at the same time and contract at the same time. So they need these junctions between the cells so the cells can communicate and contract at the same time. Okay. We also so we have gap junctions, desmosomes, adhering junctions, tight junctions, and also hemidesmosomes, and the basement membrane as specialized structures of the epithelial tissue. Meaning to say, the epithelium is mainly composed of cells, but they also have these specialized structures in the beside or in between the cells of the epithelium. Okay, so that's basically just an introduction to the specialized structures. Okay, so in terms of classification of epithelial tissue, usually we name the epithelium we classify them according to the number of cell layers. Either if it's one cell layer thick, we call it simple epithelium. If it's more than 2 cell layer thick, we call it stratified. Okay, so for example here, you can see this is the epithelium and this is the basement membrane. Okay, and this is only one cell thick. Okay, this is one cell thick, so we call it simple epithelium. But here, this part here, from here to here, this is all epithelial cells. Okay, and you can see there's many layers here, so we call it stratified epithelium. Okay, so on top of that, we also classify or name the epithelial cells according to the shape. So if it's flattened like this, you call it squamous cell. If it's cuboidal shape like this, or not too tall, we call it cuboidal. And if it's very tall, we call it columnar epithelium. Okay. So we also name the epithelium according to some cell surface modifications. So some epithelium cell surface modifications. For example, microvilli, stereocilia, and cilia at the apical part or the top part of the surface, and sometimes at the lateral and basal surface, they have folds and processes to increase the surface area. For example, in the intestine, okay, you have a lot of folds and processes, and basal striations at the basal layer lah. But I'm only going to focus on these 3 apical modifications in this lecture. So we have the microvilli. which is mainly for absorption. Okay, so where can you find the microvilli? Usually in the intestine, because imagine in the intestine you have to reabsorb a lot of things. Okay, for example, in the jejunum and ileum, you need to reabsorb the nutrients. Okay, and in the colon, mainly absorption of water. Okay, so that's why you have a lot of microvilli. These are your microvilli, these processes. So this is the the columnar epithelial type. You can see the shape. Okay, and you have with microvilli at the apical surface. This is your base and this is your apical surface with the microvilli. Okay, we also have microvilli at the kidney as well to reabsorb water and excrete, because we only want to excrete the waste products, right? So most of the water is reabsorbed in the kidney by this microvilli. Okay, next we also have stereocilia. So you can see here is stereocilia and cilia. Please do not be confused between the two. The name is quite close, but the function is different. Stereocilia is mainly for absorption. You can see this is an example of the epididymis, which reabsorbs testis. They reabsorbs the sperm in the epididymis. Okay, so the stereocilia is for absorption. Cilia is for movement. So stereocilia are long, non-motile. They don't move. The function is for absorption, whereas cilia is mainly for movement of structures that move back and forth in one direction to move things. For example, in your uterine tube, for example, okay, the movement of your uterine tube, which is your fallopian tube. So if you have you have ovulation in the ovary, so the movement of the expelled ovum inside the fallopian tube will be helped by the cilia. The cilia will help to push the ovum towards the uterus. Okay, to be expelled then down through the cervix and so on. Okay, so the cilia actually helps in movement as compared to stereocilia, which is involved in absorption. Okay, so you can see here, so examples of how we name the epithelium. So in the amnion cavity, this is the amniotic fluid inside. Okay, so it is lined by this simple squamous epithelium. Why is it named simple squamous? Because you can see the simple because it's one cell layer thick, and squamous because of the flattened appearance. The shape of the cell is flattened, so it's called simple squamous epithelium. Okay, however, if you see, for example, here in the kidney tubules, you can see cuboid shape epithelium because of the shape, and simple because only one cell layer thick. This is not the epithelium, only this layer here, so only one cell layer thick. So it is called simple because one cell layer, and cuboidal because of the shape, cuboid shape. So simple squamous and simple cuboidal epithelium. So just basically the same explanation lah. Okay, basically places with simple squamous epithelium are, if you imagine, it's very thin, right? Just one layer. Okay, so it is for where we need a lot of fast or quick diffusion or transport of material. For example, here in the alveolar sacs, because you want the oxygen and carbon dioxide to exchange very quickly in order for us to have more oxygen inside our body. Okay, so that's why the lining of the alveolar is simple squamous epithelium, because you want diffusion to be very quick. Okay, So in simple cuboidal, usually is for glands, secretion and absorption. So for example here, this is in the kidney tubules, you have simple cuboidal epithelium. Okay. Another type of epithelium, example we give here is non-ciliated simple columnar epithelium, and this is ciliated simple columnar epithelium. Remember, we have some parts. We have cilia. Okay, cilia are motile processes that helps to move things. Okay, move structures or certain for example here, the cilia helps to move the ovum. Okay, inside the uterine tube. I mentioned here, this is the ovary, this is the uterine tube or fallopian tube. So once there is an release of an egg, so the cilia inside this lining the epithelium will help to move the egg towards the uterine cavity for fertilization. Okay, in non-ciliated simple columnar epithelium, there's no cilia. Okay, so for example, in the small intestine, the mucosa is non-ciliated simple columnar epithelium. Simple again because there's only one cell thick. So you can see this is only one cell, but it is columnar shape, which is tall shape here as well. This is only one cell thick. Okay. But this one has cilia. Okay, so the name is slightly different. Okay, so where do we have simple columnar epithelium? Mainly in areas where we need absorption and secretion of mucus, enzymes, and other substances. So usually in the digestive tract. So in the stomach to anal canal, we have the columnar type but non-ciliated. Okay, in the uterus or uterine tube, we have the ones with the cilia. Okay, this is an example from the stomach mucosa or lining of the stomach, where we have simple columnar shaped epithelium. Okay, so next we have stratified squamous epithelium. And for stratified squamous epithelium, we have non-keratinized and keratinized. Okay, so basically in non-keratinized, we don't have the keratin layer. You can see here, this is the keratin layer. Okay, and this is the epithelial cells or stratified squamous epithelium. So only in the epidermis of skin you have keratinized or keratin layer, which is this whole red layer here lah. Okay. However, if it's non-keratinized, so you don't have the layer of keratin, you have the epithelial layers terus lah, okay, directly. Okay, so it's called stratified because as you can see, it's many layers, not just one cell thick. Here also we have many layers. Okay, and on top of that, because there is keratin layer, so you call it keratinized stratified squamous epithelial cells. Okay, so mainly for protection, especially it's for protection, as you can imagine, because it has many layers. So even if the outer layers are damaged, there will still be many other layers to protect the underlying surfaces lah. Okay. So next would be cuboidal shaped epithelium, mainly in your glands. So for example, here in your sweat glands, you can see the cuboidal shaped epithelium, but here is stratified, more than one cell layer. You have 2 or 3 cell layer thickness, so you call it stratified cuboidal epithelium. This is found in the duct of the sweat gland. So for example, in the male urethra also you have stratified columnar, so more tall shape, which is columnar shaped epithelium, more than one cell thickness, so you call it stratified columnar epithelium. Okay, pseudostratified means it looks like stratified, meaning you can see here it looks like there's a lot of layers, but actually the layers are only one. Okay, why is it pseudostratified? Because the cells are oddly shaped, quite long shaped like this. So, but they all each cell still sits on one basement membrane. Meaning, for stratified, not all cells touch the basement membrane, right? But for here, all cells touch the basement membrane, but they are oddly shaped. So they look like they are different layers, but actually there's only one layer lah. Okay, and this is called pseudostratified. This is, for example, in the nasal cavity lining. Okay. So again, this is the same type, which is the pseudostratified. So it looks like there's a lot of layers, but all the cells actually sit on the basement membrane, but they are oddly shaped and different size, so they look stratified. They're called pseudostratified. Okay, another type of epithelium which is special for the urinary system. This is called transitional epithelium. Okay, you can see it is different from the other epithelial layers. Okay, transitional epithelium, they are called transitional because when the organ is relaxed, it becomes many layers. Okay, but when it is stretched, so when there is a lot of urine inside, the whole lining can stretch and become less thick. So this is an example for transitional epithelium. So it can accommodate according to the stretching and relaxation of the organ lah, of the part. Okay.
Sure.
Yes. Yes.
So can we put it in full screen because we can't actually see the words properly.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah. Thank you, doctor.
Okay. Okay. So the last type of epithelium that is a bit specialized is the glandular epithelium. As the name suggests, it has glands. Okay, so that's why it's called glandular epithelium. So the epithelial cells are specialized to synthesize and secrete. So for example, proteins in the pancreas, in the sebaceous glands or adrenal gland, they secrete lipids, and in the salivary glands, they secrete saliva lah, which is complexes of carbohydrate and proteins. So and some glands can be of a single cell, so unicellular. For example, is the goblet cell, and some are in aggregates, which so they are called multicellular. Okay, and according to where they secrete the products, so if they secrete it through a duct, they are called exocrine. If they secrete the products directly into the blood, so they are called endocrine. So here, for example, here you can see between endocrine and exocrine, what is the difference. So in the endocrine gland, during development of the gland, the connection from the epithelium is totally cut off. So the gland, the gland is cut off from the top epithelium entirely. Okay, and they create their own secretory units. Okay, and for exocrine, the part of the distal part of the gland changes function, but the connection remains, and the connection is called a duct. Okay, so for exocrine, the products are secreted through the duct of the gland. However, in endocrine, because they don't have connection and they don't have the ducts, so the products of the gland is secreted directly into the capillaries or blood system. So that's the difference between endocrine and exocrine glands. So we focus on the exocrine glands because there's many types of exocrine glands. Okay, so based on the number of cells, they are called unicellular or multicellular. So for example, unicellular, we have the goblet cells. You can find the goblet cells mainly in the GIT tract, or your intestine. Okay, multicellular, there's a lot of multicellular exocrine glands. So they are classified based on different criteria. So if it's classified according to the branching pattern of the ducts, you have simple and compound. Simple means there's no branch, okay, and compound means it's branching. Okay, there's a lot of branching. So you can see these yellow areas are the glands, okay, and this is your ducts. Okay, because remember exocrine gland, they have ducts. And for simple, this is the gland and this is the ducts. Okay, so we can also classify according to the shape of the secretory end piece. So the secretory part has different shapes in different areas or different glands. Okay, so tubular, acinar, and alveolar shape. And sometimes they have both tubular and alveolar. Okay, and for the nature of secretion also, sometimes you can classify them into what they secrete. So you have mucus exocrine glands, you have serous exocrine glands, and sometimes it's mixed, or serous and mucus. For example, your submandibular gland is a mixed gland where it produces both serous and mucus production or secretion. Okay, so just a bit on the three types of gland according to secretion. Okay, so in serous acinous or glands, they secrete thin watery protein containing secretions. Okay, and these are your zymogen granules. They have zymogen granules in the center. Okay, and the cells are pyramidal shaped in serous acini. Okay, they stain quite darkly with H&E staining, and they have nuclei rounded, nuclei which is rounded and more basal or more central sometimes in the middle. The lumen is small. Okay, usually they secrete enzymes. For example, here in the parotid and lacrimal glands, we have serous acinus. Okay, so they secrete watery type of secretion. Here we have mucus acinus. So they secrete mucousy type or more thick viscous type of secretion. They stain quite lightly as compared to the serous acini. You can see all these are your serous acini. They are very pink, or they stain darkly with H&E staining. And here very pale staining, mucus acini. Okay, and the nucleus is different. Here they are rounded and more central or more to the base. Here they are flattened, not rounded but more flattened. Here you can see also, for example, this is one mucus acinus. The cells of the nucleus are flattened at the base of the cells. The lumens are usually larger as compared to this serous acinus, where it has smaller lumen in the middle. Okay, so function usually for protection and lubrication because they secrete mucus lah. Okay, for protection. Okay, for example, sublingual glands in your mouth. Okay, so they secrete mucus for saliva. Okay, so you can also have mixed acinus gland that secrete both the serous or watery type of secretion and mucus, which is the more thick type of secretion. Okay, and they also have this serous demilunes outside okay, that help to control the secretion. Okay, so for example here, as I mentioned, The submandibular gland has both, okay, and the more pale staining ones are your mucus gland, and the more thick, the more darkly stained. As you can see here, the more darkly stained are your serous glands lah. So you can see here, these are your serous and these are your mucus gland. So there's a mixture of serous and mucus glands. Okay, so this is again just a table showing what is the difference lah. Okay, rounded shape nucleus, flattened shape nucleus, bigger lumen, smaller lumen, and they have zymogen granules in the serous acini or glands, and then they have also darkly stained in the serous, and mucus is more lightly stained lah. Okay, and for action, the serous secretion usually is more for enzymatic action. For mucus, it's more for protection and lubrication. Okay, and also based on the manner of secretion, so how they secrete the products, they are named merocrine, epicrine, holocrine, and cytochrine. So for example here, merocrine secretion, the secretion discharged through intact cell membrane. So the cell membrane is still intact after the secretion is discharged. Okay, so this process of secretion is called exocytosis. Okay, and for epicrine, the apical portion of the cell disintegrates, meaning this apical part disintegrates together with the secretion. So there is some partial loss of the cytoplasm lah. Okay, and in holocrine, the entire cell, meaning the whole epithelium cell, disintegrates together or discharges together with the secretion. Okay, and this will result in cell death, meaning this cell dies off completely. So complete loss of cytoplasm. How about cytochrine? The cells are released as secretion, meaning there's no secretion inside that is released, but the whole cell is released together. So for example here, the ovum or the egg is released during ovulation. The whole egg is released, there's no secretion, right? Okay, so this is called cytochrine gland. So just one clinical correlate where because of the epithelial cell's ability to divide, okay, if there is a tumor, sometimes it can stimulate inappropriate cell division and cause a lot of replicating tumor cells to cause a tumor of the epithelial cells lah. Okay, if the tumor cells remain in the epithelium, meaning they don't cross the basement membrane, the tumor is localized to the epithelium. But once it crosses the basement membrane, it can enter the blood and metastasize to other organs. And the name of the cancer of epithelial origin is adenocarcinoma. So, okay, so for example here in breast cancer, it's called breast adenocarcinoma if the cancer starts at the breast epithelium. So for example here, this is normal epithelium, and if there is cancer cells or tumor cells caused at the epithelium lining, it will cause a lot of tumor cells to develop. Okay, but if it doesn't cross this basement membrane, it is localized inside the breast tissue. But however, if it crosses the basement membrane, here this is the basement membrane, if it crosses, it can enter the lymph node, for example, or enter the blood circulation and travel to other parts of the body and cause metastasis. We call it metastasis if the if it travels and results in cancer in other parts of the body. So the cancer has already metastasized. Okay, so I think that's all for epithelial tissue. Thank you very much. Can you fill in the form for attendance for epithelial tissue?